Итак, уважаемые друзья,
Right, so, dear friends, I'm very happy to welcome you at our international roundtable, which is about the crisis of freedom of speech in Europe and in general in the West. We'll talk about the persecution of journalists and public activists. Unfortunately, for a number of years, we record and we observe very serious trend, which is increased risks for people who dare to voice a position, a journalist position, a public position that is somehow different from the declared mainstream in the Western countries. Unfortunately, the current supervisory bodies such as the UN, the OSCE, and other international organizations that proclaim to be the defenders of the basic human rights. Unfortunately, today, these organizations don't really admit that this problem exists. Unfortunately, both the UN family bodies and the OSCE bodies
ну, я с этим ничего... Да, Вань, это у тебя проблема со связью в славном городе Ростове.
we have some problems with connection from Ivan's side. So, unfortunately, today, the international supervisory bodies such as OSCE and less but still the UN continue to actually speak from the position of the Western point of view of the world. At the same time, for a number of years, we've already seen that the situation with the fundamental right, which is the right to the freedom of speech, of voicing our opinions in the Western countries, in the countries that actually proclaimed to be the role models in the field of human rights protection, the situation in those countries gets worse. As of now, we can maybe not record the reasons, but we can at least track the chain of events that led to a situation when people that have different point of view somewhere they can't really actually voice it, and it's become a reality. For a number of years, the supervisory bodies of the UN and of the OSCE ignored the situation with the freedom of speech in the Baltic countries, in Poland, and on the territory of Ukraine. Over the last 8 to 10 years, we've seen that step by step, the situation with the freedom of speech in those countries is getting worse. And in our organization and in some other organizations, we continue to raise a question. This trend that we observe in the Baltic countries who ban or outlaw Russian media, who actually imprison Russian activists that defend the rights of the Russian-speaking population. And in Lithuania, for example, where we talk about people with differing opinions, like left-wing opinions. A couple of years ago, there was the head of the Socialist Party, Mr. Paletskis, in the prison, and Giedrius Grubauskas had to actually flee Lithuania because of the danger of being persecuted. The same situation is observed in Moldova, where a lot of activists live, work. Those activists that are not like directly pro-Russian, but they just have an opinion that is different from the political mainstream. And those activists have to leave the country. They have to live somewhere else beyond the borders of their motherland. Unfortunately, this trend was multiplied during the Ukrainian crisis over the last 9 years, when dozens, hundreds of activists had to leave the territory of Ukraine. Dozens and hundreds were persecuted, and we actually don't know everything about everybody. Some of them died, some of them are missing. We just don't know about what happened to them. We said already multiple times that it will influence the Western Europe countries that positions itself as the guide of the values, of the democratic values. And if the trends of the Western Europe or the values of the Western Europe are not actually also defended in the Eastern Europe, then the trends from the Eastern Europe will go and will spread in the Western Europe as well. And it will be the mainstream. And what we can see now in the Baltic countries, in Poland, in Ukraine, will be seen in France, in Germany, and later on in the US and Australia and in all the countries. So this is the message. And today, when we are concluding the 54th session of the UN HRC, the Human Rights Council, on the sidelines of which we organized today's event. And I do hope that the materials of our event will be taken into account by the Council. Hello, Manish. So I do hope that our conference today will provide enough information, enough material to at least attract the attention of the international supervisory bodies, surveillance bodies, to what is going on with the fundamental right, which is the freedom of speech in the countries of so-called the West. And in connection to that, I would like to give the floor to the participants of our conference today. And the first presentation, the first floor will go to our participant from Donetsk, the head of the organization Verum, Donbas. I know this person very well, and for many years already, he's been working to make the voice of people in Donbas heard. First, it was heard in Russia. I think that we managed to communicate the messages from Donbas to the Russian public, and now I'd like to give the floor to Ivan Kopyl. Yes. Hello. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here today and to be. And, well, I'll be speaking first and foremost as a citizen of Donetsk, and we've been living for 10 years in the situation of a armed conflict. And during these years, we faced the things that are attributes of a forced and armed conflicts, which is the dehumanization of the population. Because from the very beginning, the Ukrainian media called us citizens of Donbas terrorists, extremists. They were trying to say that we were just shooting ourselves. There were a lot of different charges, and unfortunately, quite often those statements were supported by the Western countries. As to the freedom of speech, we've seen an incremental ignoring and ousting of those people that voiced positions different from the Ukrainian official position by the Ukrainian authorities. So in 2014, there was a Ukrainian Donetsk journalist, Helena Blocha, and she actually was in the Ukrainian prison, and she wrote a book, 90 Days in Capture. And we also have another journalist who actually has showed the horrors of Donetsk. And he was bitten, but then we managed to find him. But now unfortunately, this other journalist cannot get back to Kiev because for Ukrainian authorities, he is a non-grata person. We also remember about Olesya Buzina, the Ukrainian historian, and a lot of other people actually suffered because of the new ideology of the Ukrainian government. And with the beginning of the special military operation, the situation got worse. As you remember, the Ukrainian media field was just cleaned over the course of 1 month. Everybody who thought differently were either just arrested, or they had to flee, or they were just destroyed. And they couldn't really communicate their point of view, and they couldn't even prove that they also might be right. Unfortunately, this process also spread across Europe. I work a lot with the journalists who come to Donbas from other countries, and I know about multiple problems that they face in Europe after their return from Donbas region, when they just tell what's going on in Donbas region and how they lose their job after that. I know that they face some problems with the intelligence services, with the police, so that happens at all the levels. And if a foreign journalist comes to Donbas region, then for this journalist, it becomes almost impossible to cooperate with the local TV or with the Russian TV. So, because if a foreign journalist enters into communication, starts a communication with the Russian TV channels or like local TV channels, they become persona non grata almost, and they sometimes can't just get back to their motherland because they are afraid of being arrested, and they have to ask for the political refuge status. And at the same time, I need to say that just a regular European citizen loses their interest to the current media feeds. Just Reuters recently said that the consumption of traditional media in 2023 losing its dynamic, and at the same time some social media and internet platforms do not replace this. But now they say that also online people can get less news than in the past. Today, as of today, less than 50% of the random groups say that they're interested in the news. And now that figure is less than 50%. And in the past, it was about 63% of people that were actually interested. Now people shy away from news. They want to ignore it. As to the trust, as of today, actually, only 4 out of 10 people in Europe say that they trust the news. And actually, in Finland, the level of trust is the highest one. And in Greece, only 19% of citizens trust the official news. Can you imagine that in Greece, only 2 people out of 10 believe to what they hear in the official news? I think that the problem of trust is because of the one-sided information presentation, and it's also because of the hidden censorship in media and on the social media. That's another problem that's already been discussed. And today we can say that internet platforms censor their materials, their content with a large number of tools, even though their leaders say the opposite. Today we see the censorship of a new type, the censorship of the internet platforms. At the same time, it's interesting to note that the majority of the European public is actually critical about the algorithms that they can see on the internet. Less than 1/3 of people in Europe say that what they see in the search results and in the news feed is actually relevant to their interests. They mostly believe that this is just imposing of some official ideas. At the same time, we do understand that censorship of internet platforms is quite different from the classical type of censorship. That's why legally it is almost unregulated. In the world legal framework and in the national legal frameworks, the censorship on the internet actually depends only on the will of the leaders of those platforms. And we know that one person can be influenced a lot by intelligence services or by some other actors. And well, internet platforms do not enter into any communication with the media. They do not respond to any questions. So strictly speaking, actually, these platforms even don't violate any rules of the legal framework. So to sum up, the current information field is being censored a lot. And this censorship is not regulated legally, and it only depends on the opinion of the leaders, the heads of these platforms. Most public notices this, but unfortunately, in the search of some alternative sources, the public just loses its interest, and that actually leads to the loss of interest at all. So the high level of censorship and the one-sided information presentation results in less interest. People just stop to care, and it is even more dangerous than the situation in the past. Thank you.
Большое спасибо. Да, если есть у кого-то вопросы, пожалуйста.
Dear participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Or we can have Q&A and discussion at the end of our conference today. Maybe we could discuss some general questions, because as far as I understand, the vision and the opinions that we have are quite similar, so to say. Okay, dear colleagues, now I'd like to give the floor to our dear friend from India, to an Indian journalist, to Manish. Manish, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maksim.
Да, Маниш, к сожалению, сейчас не могу зачитать все ваши
Well,
регалии.
unfortunately, Manish, I can't list all your positions and all the information about you. Manish is our very dear friend, Manish Jha, the journalist of the Central Indian television. He's been to Donbas a lot of times, and his reports are the ones that actually allow us to demonstrate from the territory of Donetsk to India, which is very far from us, but which we like a lot, which we love. We can actually communicate the truth that unfortunately a lot of journalists try to hide because of the influence of some other journalists. So Manish, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Maxim. So this is Manish Jha, a journalist from India. I represent TV9, which is the largest news network in India, and we have 700 million of viewership. And first of all, I would like to say that I'm really proud that I'm an Indian journalist, not a European journalist, especially when I see a condition of my friend Sonja and others who are not able to go back to home. then I can understand that how lucky I am, because I can come to Russia, I can go back to India, and my government will never ask that why you went to Russia. And I must share with you, although my English is not so good, so my apology for that, because my primary language is Hindi. But I must share with you that during the last 1.5 years, 1.5 years, I spent a couple of months in Donbas. Uh, I'm really thankful to my friend Ivan, who helped me a lot for the war coverage. And during this war coverage, what I realized that you know it, what is happening in Europe, this continent which was always claiming that uh, they are the protector of human rights and the press freedom. But what is the reality? The reality is that not a single European journalist are allowed to visit that conflict zone. I'm talking about uh, I'm talking about the mainstream journalists of Europe who can come and who can report on the ongoing conflict. If they will come, then they will be banned, they will be sanctioned, that happened with Sonja and some other friends. Uh, right now, I'm in Israel. Again, one more conflict zone I'm covering. I'm doing my reporting. But I must say that whatever experience I had uh, in Donbas, what I realized that how the Western media has completely closed their own eye. Is it their wish or their government wish? Because when I was in Donetsk, I was witness when the two rockets fell on the minibus and the 8 persons burned alive. The next day, I didn't find a single news on BBC, on CNN, or any mainstream media. So that is the reality of Western media. And I'm lucky that I had an opportunity, being an Indian journalist, to put the Russian perspective, to share the truth with my viewers. And by doing this, I'm really proud. But at the same time, I'm worried about the all kind of freedom and rights about the West by, for the European media, because I don't see that they are able to do anything. So definitely the Europe and Western world has to think that when they are claiming the champion of democracy or the freedom of expression, they must realize that what is on ground, especially when we are talking at the practical situation. So right now, since I'm here, and it's again one of the war zones. So I'm I'm what I would like to say that what I experienced in Donbas, Crimea, and some other places, that the world should know what is the truth, and for that, the journalists should be allowed to come to visit there. And for that, this is the responsibility of Western countries, that they should permit their own journalists. They should trust on their own journalists, because the journalist will come and will show the truth, the hypocrisy of the Western countries. Thank you so much, Maxim, because I have to go and I'm getting late, so I'm not able to spend so much time. But thank you so much, and it's a really nice experience to join with all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Маниш. Очень был
Yes, Manish, thank you very much. I was very happy to hear you. Indeed, it's very important today to actually give the floor to independent journalists, to those journalists who are ready to speak the truth from different places. Unfortunately, today we face a situation when the world system is entering the period of armed conflicts and crises. unfortunately, they emerge one after another. Thank you very much for your work, Manish. Thank you very much for being at the edge, the front line of these events. And now I'd like to give the floor to dear Eva Karen Bartlett from Canada, an independent journalist. Eva, are you here with us today? Can you hear us? Okay, probably.
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Great.
Пожалуйста, вам слово.
The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So apologies, I'm going to be reading what I want to say because I know we're all constrained by time and I have a lot I want to say. So excuse me for looking down at my phone. I don't usually do this, but anyway, I first wanted to say that in my opinion, journalists who are either from or living in the region they're reporting from are most at risk of being maimed or killed simply due to the fact that they're long-term. And also particularly given the racism and dehumanization that Ivan was talking about. So I just wanted to say that I really respect their courageous work and I try to share it widely. But foreign journalists do obviously play a significant and important role, particularly given we all speak different languages and have different audiences and reach different audiences. And of course, foreign journalists have been attacked and killed in the line of their reporting and due to their reporting. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with me or not familiar with me. In brief, I'm both an American and Canadian. I grew up in Canada, journalist. Since 2007, I've reported from the West Bank of occupied Palestine. Since 2008, for a cumulative 3 years, I lived in and reported from the Gaza Strip, which is now currently being bombarded by Israel. I was there during two very, words can't even suffice, horrific Israeli massacres of the Palestinian population in 2009 and 2012. And then from 2014 onwards until 2021, I was reporting from Syria 15 times, sometimes for months on end. Then in 2019, I went to the Donbas for my first time. And then over the course of last year and into this year, I was there another 8 times, most times for a period of about 3 weeks. So none of obviously what I've reported, and I'm sure of what my colleagues here have reported, will ever be included honestly and fairly and wholly in Western corporate media's reporting on the area in question. Obviously, it won't be because we are giving voice to the people who are being warred upon, whether by Ukraine or terrorist funded and fomented by the West in Syria, or Israel in Palestine. So in all the areas I've reported on, I've seen war crimes. And had I not been in the Donbas over the course of last year and into this year, I wouldn't have the important eyewitness information that we all need in order to combat the nonstop, incessant Western propaganda and lies. So just in brief, some of the things I was in Donbas and was able to report on was the widespread Ukrainian bombing of central Donetsk and also areas around the Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk, particularly markets, busy streets, parks, hospitals, schools. In the space of just 5 days in September, for example, I saw many of the 26 bodies that were murdered in those 5 days by Ukraine's bombing of central Donetsk. Most of the time, the bodies were strewn in the streets or on sidewalks, or in one occasion in a bus burnt out, or parts of the bodies, indistinguishable parts of the bodies. And I'm sure you all have seen these types of graphic scenes yourself. And it's very important, in my opinion, because the media does censor this reality from Western and global audiences. It's very important to speak as graphically as unfortunately the civilians experience and witness themselves. I was also in Donetsk when Ukraine in late July fired more of the petal mines via rockets onto the center of Donetsk. So I was able to document the widespread firing of these petal mines, and have kept following the issue to the point where, you know, as of early October this year, these mines have maimed 135 civilians and 3 people have died from them. And this is a very insidious and an important issue. We all know that were it Russia firing these mines onto Ukrainian areas, of course, global media would have it front page center every day for months on end. Human Rights Watch only recently reported on the use of Ukraine's use of these mines in Izium, but not in Donetsk. So again, it's very important that we are in tandem with a local journalist from the region able to report on these crimes. I was also in Donetsk in Donbas during the referendum in September 2022. And over the course of those 5 days, I was able to go to different districts of Donetsk, also Gorlevka and Mariupol, and to talk with people and to document scenes of peaceful reporting of people who were not being forced at gunpoint to report as the Western corporate media were claiming. And after I went to the Yelenovka prison, a detention center that was bombed in late July, and saw the corpses of the Ukrainian POWs, and this was bombed, as we all know, by Ukrainian forces. When I tweeted about that, a pro-Ukrainian British propagandist tweeted at Ukrainian special forces saying, "Hear that," and the implication was, Eva is on the ground and you should assassinate her. And again, I'm sure we have all faced threats due to the nature of our work. Some days later, the Donbas Palace, which I was staying in, I don't usually stay there, but at that particular point, I was staying in a hotel. I usually rent in a discreet apartment, but I was in that hotel. And some days after that tweet at Ukrainian Special Forces, the hotel came under Ukrainian fire, the last 2 shells landing near and directly next to the hotel, killing a woman on the sidewalk and blowing the windows and doors in. And it could be coincidental that happened, or it's also not a stretch of the imagination to think that Ukraine was targeting journalists that they knew were housed in the hotel. So anyway, I could say a lot more, but I just wanted to give some points of things that I've witnessed, and I'm sure all my colleagues can say a whole lot more. But then in June last year, Canadian state media CBC decided to smear me, and that's fine because I'm accustomed to these smears, having been smeared by Western corporate media since 2016 due to my reporting on Syria. But what the CBC did was they drew from the Mirotvorets listing on me. And we all know that Mirotvorets is a form of censorship. It's an intimidation tactic. Well, also it's a murder list, clearly, but it's also meant to dissuade people, journalists, activists, human rights activists, children from speaking out. So the CBC, instead of being alarmed that one of their citizens, a journalist, was on this list, instead drew from the list and did a smear on me. And at the same time, they flagged my name to a Ukrainian extremist in Canada, of which there are many. As an aside, I'm sure you're all aware that in Parliament some weeks ago, Parliament gave a standing ovation to a literal Ukrainian Nazi. And even the Prime Minister of Canada and the Deputy Prime Minister were clapping, applauding this Nazi. And it's not surprising, given the fact that that Canada has entered between 2,000 and 3,000 Nazis after the Second World War and has allowed them to live freely. The person who I think was applauding the hardest was our Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, whose grandfather, who she's very proud of, was a Nazi propagandist, and she continues his line of work very diligently. So all that to say that as a journalist, having seen the things I've seen and reported what I've reported in Donbas, I haven't been back to Canada since 2022. And at this point, I'm not going back anytime soon. It's not a safe climate for someone like us to go to. I don't feel I would be safe there. But all that's pretty much all I want to say about myself and what I've done. I do want to just use the rest of my time to talk about the fact that, again, as we're all aware, journalists from the regions being targeted by NATO have been assassinated, have been maimed, have been kidnapped. Russian journalists in the Donbas, Syrian journalists targeted by Western-backed and fomented Syrians, Palestinian journalists targeted by Israeli forces. Since 2000, at least 50 Palestinian journalists have been killed in the line of reporting. The more recent example that I think many are aware of is that of Shireen Abu Akleh, killed in May 2022, shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. Many journalists witnessed it. There's been no accountability whatsoever. And as I mentioned at the beginning, as we speak, Gaza is under intense Israeli bombardment. That Gaza is a very small enclave. As I said, I lived there 3 years in 2 wars. I'm very acutely aware there's no way out of Gaza. The sole exit point that Palestinians could feasibly leave via has been bombed by Israel repeatedly. Ironically, after Netanyahu and other Israeli officials said Palestinians should leave to avoid the bombing. And the population is 2.3 million now. So feasibly, how are 2.3 million going to leave by a single crossing that Israel bombs? On October 10th, the Israeli human rights groups B'Tselem wrote, Since Saturday, Israel has dropped hundreds of tons of bombs on Gaza, and it refers to Netanyahu's call for Palestinians to leave and that they simply cannot leave. Well, I already mentioned that there's no bomb shelters, but the other thing I wanted to emphasize was, for example, in January 2009, Israel bombed a UN school holding Palestinian internally displaced civilians, to which Israel had the coordinates and knew very well it was a school holding a humanitarian school holding civilians, and it killed 43 civilians in that one single act. Israeli forces, just like Ukraine has done throughout the Donbas, they shell anything. Anything is considered a target. Nothing is civilian to them. So schools, hospitals, medics and ambulances, media buildings, and they have been attacking, just like Ukraine has done in the Donbas. They've been attacking Palestinian medics. In 2009, I worked with medics, and one I worked with was killed by an Israeli-fired dart bomb fired directly at his ambulance. Other medics I worked with came under Israeli sniper fire during ceasefire hours, the 13 shots reaching the ambulance I was in. Thankfully, the medic was only injured, but 23 were killed by the end of the war. And as of yesterday, Israel has killed 4 more Palestinian Red Crescent medics. As we are speaking, also the 54th session of the UN Human Rights Council occurred or is occurring, and they were discussing unilateral coercive measures, which they say are contrary to international law and disproportionately affect the poor and most vulnerable populations, and that's absolutely correct. And in light of that, I wanted to highlight that for over 15 years, the Palestinians of Gaza have been under Israeli brutal siege. And Syria has been under sanctions for at least a decade, if not longer, both of which have affected direly the population's ability to live. The Western sanctions on Syria and the Israeli siege on Gaza are a form of terrorism. And I've seen the impact on both populations of these sanctions, on top of already years of war. The UN has been warning for years and years and years that Gaza would be unlivable as of 2020. Well, it's now 2023. And for years has been reporting 95% of Gaza's water is undrinkable. And just yesterday, I believe it was, Israel fully cut off food, water, electricity, and fuel to the population of Gaza, 2.3 million people living in an open-air prison. And so this is obviously a massive war crime. And media just simply aren't reporting on this. So back to the whole theme of censorship, although we were talking about how we as journalists are being censored, but an entire population is being censored as they're being genocided. As of the latest statistics I've seen as of now are over 1,300 Palestinians killed, over 6,000 injured. 60% of the fatalities are women and children. Entire families are being killed at one time. The main city, hospital in Gaza City, Ashifa Hospital has no electricity, is running out of fuel. All the beds are taken in ICU. Medicines are running out. And perhaps not remarkably, Israeli authorities are once again openly calling for the genocide of the Palestinian population in Gaza. Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, said Israel is fighting against human animals, and that he lifted all restrictions on Israel's assault in Gaza. So I want to refer back to what Ivan was saying about the dehumanization of the Russian population in Donbas, which Ukraine did and continues to do, and which Western media do. And we're seeing the same dehumanization of Palestinians to the point where a Western public, ignorant because the corporate media doesn't allow them to know the truth, and because voices like ours are censored, can almost, if not fully, justify Israel's wanton genocide of the people of Gaza. One claim that we heard Ukraine make over and over again against Russia is that Russia was raping civilians, particularly children and baby. Israel is saying the same thing about Palestinian resistance, and the Western corporate media ran with it without checking, without providing an iota of evidence. And in fact, it turns out, just as the claim of rapes emanated from a Ukrainian official, the claim of rapes recently regarding Palestinian resistance emanates from an Israeli soldier who is also an extremist who called for one particular village to be wiped out and has said that Palestinians have barbaric DNA. So just to sum up, these lies are generated to divert from actual war crimes by Ukraine, by Israel, and to generate hatred from the Western public against the actual victims, the people who are resisting genocide. We're seeing the exact same inversion of reality we've seen in Syria, in Donbas, and in Palestine before this. And I think that these sorts of dehumanization and lies and the obfuscation of the war crimes being perpetrated are a form of extreme censorship. So when we talk about censorship, yes, we are all being censored, but also populations are being censored. Their stories are being written out of history. And as a result, people are dying. So I think it's my moral obligation to speak out about this. That's all I have to say.
Большое спасибо, Ева. Отдельное большое спасибо.
Eva, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being on time within the time given. Thank you for your professionalism. Thank you for your work, because I do understand completely that, well, proceeding from the information that I got about my friends in the Western countries, I do understand very well that those people who actually say things that you say, these people, they risk being cancelled. They risk being cancelled from some information resources, from some platforms, and they risk being cancelled from work. Thank you for your civil position. That's very valuable for us. Thank you. And now I'd like to give the floor to my good friend whom I met at several platforms. And she's been participant to a number of our events within the OSCE and the UN activities, independent journalist from the Netherlands, Sonja van der Ende. Sonja, thank you very much for taking part in our event today, and now the floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you. I will introduce myself to the people who don't know me. My name is Sonja van der Ende. I'm an independent journalist from the Netherlands. I can only say that what Eva just said, I can fully comply with it. I also went to the Donbas a lot of times since the start of the special military operation. Before that, I was in Syria and also was in Palestine. I saw, like Eva did, a lot of gruesome things going on. Try to say it or write it for the Western media. But unfortunately, over the years, we can say that the Western media has become less and less, well, honest reporting. So we have a real crisis of freedom of speech going on in the Western world, and in particular in Europe, also, of course, in the US and Canada. But Europe, especially my country, the Netherlands, was once a beacon of freedom. And I mean, I want to speak also about Europe because we have this European Union. And one of the reasons why I'm now living in Russia is, besides it's a wonderful and a tolerant country, is the total disappearing of freedom of speech and the oppression of journalistic freedom in the whole of Europe, and especially my country, then the Netherlands, the whole of the Western world. So after my return reporting from the Donbas, that was last year, I was put on several lists, as I will point out later in my speech. And I myself decided to stay in Russia because I feel, and I now have the confirmation, that it's not safe for me to return to the Netherlands. Since the start of the special military operation in the Donbas, which in the West is interpreted like a war or an invasion of Ukraine, and any journalist who says or writes something about Russia, even when we write something neutral about it, and of course about the conflict what's going on in the Donbas, well, the Western narrative says that Ukraine is annexed by Russia. And it's very bad to write about it because you are considered to be a suspicious person. You are now supporting somehow a regime, which is totally ridiculous. But this is what they say, the Western governments and especially EU. So I think it's not normal that journalists like myself or others like Eva or other journalists who went to the Donbas and Syria are now, in this situation, because only they are reporting about the crimes like what is happening in Ukraine, the crimes about, for instance, the Azov battalion, of which I saw myself in Mariupol, in the Azov steel factory. And we are all ended up on a dead list. Actually, they call it a peacemaker list, of course, which is run by the CIA and Ukraine. You think CIA? Yes, it's also the CIA, because when you go to their website and you look at it, you can see the address of the CIA on the list. It clearly says Langley. So this is called, what most of you know, I think, the Miro Vorets peacemaker list. But that's what we do it. We call it the kill list, because already people are killed on the list. The European Union is very hypocrite, and the Western countries as well. They know about the existence of this list, but the EU, also the UN, are in total denial, because if you read on the created EU disinformation website, in contrast to the claim from Russia, the Ukrainian government is not associated with the Miro Vorets website. The State Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, even launched an investigation into its operations. So Ukrainian police also looked into its operations following an early request from some human rights watchers. But as I pointed out, the SBU, the Ukrainian Intelligence Service itself, is running this list in cooperation with the CIA. So how can they investigate their own list? Well, a contradiction. That's what everything is these days in the West. So I call it a lie. The Ukrainian government is involved in this list, just like the CIA. So, and why is, for instance, the Western Wikipedia website saying that the Miro Vorets website and dead list, what I call it, was founded in 2014 by the former department head of Security Service of Ukraine, Roman Zaitsev. And according to Wikipedia, the website was launched already in December 2014 by the Ukrainian politician Georgy Tukamet, with the support of MP and advisor to the Minister of the Internal Affairs, Arsen Avkov, and Anton Gerashenko. Well, he's a famous name for many Russians, and he's still in charge of this list. So if you want to argue that it's false information on Wikipedia, you should label Wikipedia, the West should label Wikipedia as fake news as well, and they have to be put on this EU disinformation list, of course, as well. So there's a lot of evidence circulating on the internet, and also in the Donbas. The people know very well who is doing the crimes there. And this is totally crazy. And it is an outrage that the Western media, is not taking any notes of it, that they are not protecting their own journalists like me or many others who are now a subject of being labeled as, I don't know, somehow when I read their news from the West, I call it their news. It's really very terrible, because they, like what happened to Eva as well, they make a smear campaign out of you. They label you nearly as a terrorist. And, they go, if there are people killed in Russia, like the murders on Daria Dugina, Vladimir Tatarsky, and attacks on other journalists, all of them were on this kill list. And afterwards, the Ukrainian SBU wiped out their names and say, okay, they're eliminated. So it's full out crazy, of course. And how the people in the Donbas know all these things, but the people in the West don't know it, because they cancel us. This is what it actually is, a culture, a cancel culture. They cancel people, they cancel journalists, and they cancel whole populations, like the people in the Donbas, or exactly now what is going on in the Gaza, of course. And this is going on for years and years already. So, it's very terrible. Also, me, myself, I'm on the EU disinformation list just for writing of what I have seen in the Donbas. And before that, what I said in Syria, and before that in Palestine. But who is the EU to interfere, or the UN to interfere with journalistic freedom? What is bad and what is good? This is suppressing of freedom of speech. Even if you don't agree with someone's point of view or writing, because this entry on the list, I can't perform my profession as a journalist anymore in the West, because who wants to hire me there? So I have been most certainly put on the Dutch Secret Service list. That's called the AEVD. I recently submitted a request for my own file, but okay, it takes a while, and I don't know if I can see my file. I'm still waiting on their response. So why does the UN or EU or other international organizations don't do anything about journalistic freedom or people under oppression? They defend the journalists who, according to them, are writing for the Western narrative. I mean, it's pure propaganda, of course, and blame anyone who is writing or reporting from other sides of the conflicts that, according to Western narrative, are totalitarian states, or they are even at war with the West. This is what they say. This is what politicians say in the West, especially in the Netherlands. The ex-PM used to say this in his weekly speeches, and without, of course, an official declaration of war. So the Western media is writing this as well. Is this journalistic freedom? No, it is. And why does the West abandon people like me and incriminating people like in Donbas or now in Palestine? Why do they close bank accounts from journalists? Or PayPal or any other Western payment systems? Social security numbers. It's called in Dutch burgerservice number, which makes living in Europe impossible. You can't get a job, a house, insurance without it. So, and why in some cases in Germany, I know my German colleagues too, maybe people know them as well, Thomas Röper and Alina Lip. Why do they get 3 years in prison when they go back to Germany? I mean, this is not journalistic freedom. This is oppression. This is oppression by the West. And also, like me, when we should go back to EU, we are already in the EU Schengen alert system. And as soon as we go, then the alarm bells go off. And of course, they are now already having a new system called ETIAS, which goes into effect in 2024. And when you go at the border of any EU country, they will first look at you carefully, and if you are not a desired subject, well, you cannot enter the EU. So it's not only for people who are not from the EU, but also residents from the EU. So I can say clearly the West has become totalitarian, and this is very terrible. It's affecting many people around the world. I mean, it's beyond words. It's what I can say. And they use this fancy word, a magic word, democracy. Well, democracy is long gone. I think since many years it's gone or over. So moreover, like me and probably other journalists, we are afraid to go back to our country. Maybe not all journalists have sanctions, but we are afraid because also the SBU can kill you everywhere around Europe, and the CIA, of course. And in some cases they tried. I know some examples from journalists who, are attacked by the SBU outside their own country even, but in Europe, and like for instance in Turkey. And this is a shameful thing for the West because, they're doing it against their own citizens. We are not criminals. We are not performing any criminal act, and we are not terrorists or something. We are just journalists. We are reporting from a war zone. We are reporting what is according to our standards or the truth. I mean, like me, I reported the truth from the Donbas, what I saw. I spoke with a lot of people there. I was there, what I said, since the beginning of the special military operation. I spoke to many people. I saw that people were in the basements there, and when they saw us, they were first eager to speak to us, but when they knew, okay, we are going to tell the truth, then they told us all these horrific stories, and we are trying our best to give these stories to the West. But as we said, it's very difficult at the moment. Also with the tech, this is high tech, of course. This is very difficult at the moment. We are censored also on platforms like Facebook, X or Twitter, what it was called before. We can write there, but then all of us, I think, we are not tortured online with these NAVO fellows. They are NATO, actually. They are the young ones from NATO. who are putting very terrible pictures under your tweet, or they even threaten you about, when we see you, we will kill you. This is what is happening on platforms. And the Western countries are speaking about freedom of speech and tolerance. But in my opinion, there is no freedom of speech left anymore. And because all the Russian websites are blocked in Europe, or from Iran, Syria, it's all blocked. And this is, of course, very terrible if they still speak about freedom of speech. So to sum up and to actually end this, we have to fight as journalists against a wall. In the early days, we had the Berlin Wall, but now we have a digital wall and also a new wall, because we know that walls are being built, like, for instance, in Finland and Poland. So the West is now building walls, and they are shutting off everything. And this is, I think, maybe it's a good thing in the end, because they are shutting off themselves as well. But at the moment, we are somehow victim. People in Russia are victims, and people all over the countries who are suppressed or having a terrible war on them, like in Gaza, we are the victims at the moment. But okay, we must fight and try to be not the victims anymore. And we are doing our best to do something against it. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Соня.
Sonja, thank you very much. Well, as always, I respect very much what you do and what you say. Indeed, this is very valuable, and I do hope that the situation in your country will change as well. And I do hope that freedom and true democracy will come, that all the people that are fighting for democracy will win, and that the true democracy will prevail, not only in the Netherlands, but also around the world. Thank you for what you do. And now I would like to give the floor to our dear friend from Australia. Thank you very much, Johnee from Cafe Revolution. Johnee helped us to organize our stream today. We are streaming on multiple platforms, and I hope that our stream will be seen by many, many people. Johnee has been reporting on what is going on in Donbas, showing it to the wide public of the Western audience. He tries to actually tell the truth that is ignored and hidden by the mainstream media. Thank you, Johnee, very much for what you do. And now it's my great pleasure to give the floor to you. Johnee, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good day, everybody. I'm Johnee. Yeah, I'm based at the moment in Donetsk. The reason I asked Maksim now to talk, because this has been the biggest artillery duel maybe this year, the biggest shelling. We went out filming all day, civilians' neighborhood, and the shelling never stopped for 1 second. So now I came back actually just to be on this stream and edit the video. But if there's any major event, I have to go out immediately again, because basically we document all the suffering of the civilians. I've been here for 10 weeks. I didn't even have time yet to go to the military front line. It's not even so much interesting for me. I'm here to basically document what Western weapons are doing to the civilians here. And the crazy thing is, I've been here for 10 weeks. I'm the only English-speaking journalist that's based in the Donbas. There's hundreds on the other side, and there's one here. Yeah, Patrick is around also, but Patrick is almost like a citizen here. But like, I'm the only one here, and that shows you something. I mean, look at Gaza also. There's thousands of journalists on the Israeli side. There's a few ultra brave ones on the Palestinian side, and they're getting killed every day. So there is something happening here. And Maksim, I was really surprised in the opening statement. I just made myself a few notes here, not to forget. In the opening statement, you said that we have to be careful that the West, Europe and the West, doesn't go into the space of suppressing journalism and oppression and dictatorship. The West is already there. The West has been there for a while. I mean, I remember lecturing in Russia in 2018 in places like Academic Gorodok and other places, and I was mentioning that I feel that there's more freedom of speech in Russia than in my country. And that was 2018. And people laughed at me. They said, what are you talking about? In Russia, it's like this and like this. You have freedom in your country. Well, I think when COVID came, everybody saw that we don't have freedom. Like, regardless of what you think about COVID, only one side of the narrative was allowed to be shown. And like my channel on YouTube was deleted during COVID. This is the pattern with COVID, with Ukraine, with Gaza. There's only one side of the narrative that's that the West wants to show you. There's no open discussion anymore. I mean, I come from a family of journalists. I remember living, traveling with my father, living 2 years here, 2 years there, 2 years there, and there was always discussion. There's absolutely no discussion anymore. And I myself, I approached every news media in Australia. I said to them, I'll give you my material for free. I said, I make no political comments. I'm just going to give you my interviews, my on-site things, I'm just going there when the houses are burning, when the people are injured. I'm not making any political comments usually. No, they don't want to show anything. A couple of channels replied to me and said to me, okay, show us a couple of your videos. And then when I showed them, they said, no, we can't show this. So I think it's a total lie that there's still anything left in the West that is free. And I think another revolution is taking place at the moment, is the revolution of media. This is the first time in history that mainstream media is redundant. It's like there's no place for mainstream media. I know in Australia, they say that about 70 to 75% of the people don't trust mainstream media anymore. So it's all in our hands, in the hand of social media. And of course, we're being blocked and suppressed and stuff like this, but we still have a voice. And it started with the conflict in Ukraine, that the real voice is coming through independent journalists. I mean, maybe it started with Gaza, like with Eva's work in Gaza and stuff like this, but it's so much more difficult to report from Gaza than it is even from here. I mean, here, I don't know, people may be afraid to come here. I'm not sure why there's no more independent journalists based in Donbas. But in Gaza, you're basically risking your life any second. I mean, it's not about snipers. It's about one-ton bombs and you're gone. So I don't know if journalism even exists in the West anymore. To me, it seems it's more like propaganda than journalism. Just to give you one example, I mean, we've all seen the pictures from Gaza in the last days. Imagine if Russia did this for half a day. Imagine if Russia did 1 hour of bombing, like the Israelis are doing 24/7. The whole world will be up in arms. They will just be like Russia, like terrorists, breaking every human rights on the planet. The Israelis are doing that 24/7. It's not the first time. They can't hold this excuse of what happened in the first day of this war in Gaza, and we still don't know if anything they're saying is true about it. They've done it again and again and again. But they act with impunity because they control the media in the world. You know, so, I mean, does anybody in this panel really believe that there's still journalism out there? I mean, I don't really. There are independent journalism, but within media organizations, I think it's all controlled propaganda. I mean, that's my personal point of view. Today, one nurse died in the shelling this morning here in Donetsk. Again, all what I'm seeing, 10 weeks, I'm going out every single day. I'm only seeing civilian places being targeted. Only civilian places. Is there any word in Western media about it? And when I talk to people, this is also another thing that fascinates me. When I talk to people and I ask them, how do you see the solution? What do you want to see happen? No one says to me things like, we want Ukraine destroyed, or we want to wipe up all of them. Because they all actually have relatives on the other side. They only say one thing to me: the West has to get out of it, because the moment the West is out of it, we'll sort out the problem. Yeah, I got a lot more to say, but I'm not really sure about the limits of time and things like this. I may stay in this panel, but if there's an emergency out, because there's non-stop shelling outside, there's just been an anti-air just got a HIMAR out just outside my window, like 100 meters from my window. So I work with a bit of crew to support me here, like basically a guy that helps me get everywhere. So if he rings me that something happens, I'm out. But if not, yeah, I'll stay and continue to discuss things on the panel. Yeah. And I appreciate all of you, and I admire all of your courage. And yeah, just one thing more. It's quite interesting. Most of my friends in Australia, they don't ask me if I'm afraid to be here, like from the shells or anything like this. The only question they ask me is, are you scared what's going to happen to you when you go back home? And I said to them, I don't know what's going to happen to me when I go back home. I don't know even if I'm going to go back home while the conflict still lasts. I haven't yet decided. I mean, I may ask for protection here like many other journalists have asked. I haven't thought about it yet even, but nobody asked me, yes, are you afraid of dying from shells? Are you afraid of getting hurt? No, they just asked me one thing, and that shows you where the West is at. I report only on civilians. I talk only on civilians. I report civilian suffering, and still everybody knows that my government, the Western government, is not going to like what I'm doing. Yeah, that's it, Maxim, what I have to say this moment.
Дорогой Джонни, большое спасибо.
Dear Johnee, thank you so much, especially if, to be honest, your final words, they were shocking for me indeed. It shows the depth. Nobody is asking, are you afraid of a shelling when you are in Donetsk? Imagine this, under the constant shelling with cluster munitions that is maximally affecting the civilians. But they ask you instead, here, while you are in physical threat, they're asking, what about your fate when you presumably will go home? This speaks about this level of xenophobia, which is in the Western communities and the society, could be a real hindrance for further normalization globally in the world to come to the ideals of peace and clear democracy, so to say. Thank you, Johnee, for your work, for your words. Thank you for your today's work and support in facilitation of this event. And as of me, I want to let the floor to the independent journalist from Serbia, Dragana Trifkovic. Dear Dragana, I am happy to see you.
Good afternoon, dear participants of Roundtable. I would like first to thank the organizers for invitation to participate. Today, freedom of speech is threatened to the extreme, and thanks to the politics of the West, I will say, which assure us that they are fighting for democracy and human freedom. I'm now in the city of Belgorod. It's near Ukrainian border, near Kharkov. And last night they hit the Belgorod. 3 people died. It's happening almost every day, but you will not read this. In Belgorod, a big international conference on people's diplomacy. And here I met a lot of people from Middle East, from African countries, from Asia, but only 3 people from Europe are here. One colleague from Poland, one from France, and me. So I will also say something about my experience. I also lead the Center for Geostrategic Studies in Serbia, and the main topic is the conflict zones. So I'm writing a lot about this, and I also have a lot of problems like other colleagues. For example, when I started to write about what is happening in Kosovo, as you know, the Kosovo is Serbian territory occupied by NATO, and Albanian separatists are torturing Serbian people who live there continuously, but the West is not reacting. So I write a lot about this, and after this they attacked me, and they accuse me that I'm the head of Russian spy network for Balkans. It's the same way when I visit the Palestine and start to write about, it was in 2008 when I first time visited Palestine. I start to write about what is happening there, that people are living in the camp or open air jail, and Israel state is torturing the people, destroying their homes and stealing the land. After that, they accuse me for anti-Semitism. But it is funny because Palestinians are also Semit people. So I also visit Donbas a lot of times. First time in 2014, and I visited in 15, and I'm a lot of I have traveled a lot of time to Donbas. So also I wrote in media what is happening there, and then the mass medias accuse me for neo-Nazism. I interview some volunteers in Donbas from Russia, but I also interviewed the Azov fighters who are in the jail there. And as I said, the mass medias accuse me for neo-Nazism. So I'm also at this Mirotvorets database, and also at this Zelensky blacklist. So we can find a lot of examples. Also, when I visit Iran and start to write about my good impressions about this country, mass media accuse me that I'm the jihadist. So this is the same model. So I will say that the journalist profession has been compromised and disgraced, because investigative journalism has been abolished, and subservient journalism has been introduced. This trend begins a long time ago, I will say in the early 90s, and today is experiencing its peak. I know it very well because I'm from Serbia, which was satanized by the media, mass media in 90s. We have not been able to repair the damage caused to the reputation of Serbia by the global media until now, until today. So leading media controlled by Western power centers have been used as a weapon for years against all countries and people who want to preserve their independence, sovereignty, dignity, their value system, and which do not fit into the Western-centric system. Recently, the Center for Geostrategic Studies conduct research based on which a documentary film was made. The name of documentary is When Lying Became a Profession. So we came up with the following data. 19% of the media in the United States is controlled by just 6 companies: News Corp, Time Warner, Sony, Comcast, Viacom, and Disney. 30 years ago, this media space was controlled by about 50 companies. The aforementioned giant companies control the media in Europe as well as on the other continents, and their annual individual amounts to tens of billions of dollars. These 6 companies controlled about 70% of the cable television, numerous radio stations, as well as printed newspapers around the world. Such monopolized media is very easy to use as a political weapon. And the problem is that journalists are already taught during their studies that they should be abated and actually reduce their work to copying propaganda pamphlets. Last week, we published the text on the testimony of a journalist from France about the experience of working for the French media. And she writes about the fact that Élysée Palace invited the chief editors of the media in France to explain them to how they should report to the citizens of France. The same problems exist in almost all European countries, and that the ruling structures appointed the editors of the main medias and imposed their political agenda on them. The paradox of today is what we hear about democracy and human freedoms every day. In many cases, those who utter those words simultaneously carry out persecution and violence against freedom. Numerous independent journalists as well as intellectuals are under attack of biased propaganda for expressing their own views, like we heard already, which have led them to various blacklists and are exposed to constant threats. Ukraine, which supposedly strives for democracy and European integration, has actualized the practice of persecution dissidents and creating a list of enemies. Zelensky regime, and at the behest of the US and NATO, targets and persecutes free-thinking people around the world, calling them information terrorists, Russian agents, propagandists, and similar names. These are public figures who impose narratives and present their own view on the conflict between NATO and Russia. As I said, I'm also on this blacklist just because of the position I advocate, which are not politically suitable for the persecutors of free thought. Ethical codes in journalism have completely disappeared, and media dealing with manipulation construct indictments without any evidence. I'm also in contact with numerous independent journalists from various European countries who, because of their objective reporting from the battlefield, from the front line, suffer and they are under repression, which is why they had to move. Many of them live in war zones now, and they are prevented from returning to their countries of origin. We already heard this from Sonja as well. And the Center for Geostrategic Studies organized recently the roundtable in Moscow. So we invited the colleagues, the independent journalists from European countries who live now in Moscow because they're not able to go back to their homes. So we discussed about this problem, American influence in media, American influence in politics as well, and the problems which they made in Europe. Also, many associations of journalists are corrupt, and the whole system is made to make it impossible for independent journalists to do their work.
I beg your pardon, we need to be conscious of time.
I think it's obviously example of attempt to kill freedom of speech is the case of Julian Assange, who has been imprisoned for many years because of truth he spoke. So I think this practice must be stopped, and journalism must be depoliticized and return to certain professional standards. The monopolies in the media must be abolished. And so it's very important to discuss about this topic, and that is why I suggest that we continue with this roundtable and with communication. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо, Драгана.
Thank you very much, Dragana. Thank you very much for what you say. Thank you for your work, especially taking into account the danger that all of us, especially you, face when you actually work quite close to the front line, contact line, and in the hearts of every citizen of Russia, inside all Russian hearts, the question of Serbia and its destiny is especially important. Thank you very much for what you do. And now I'd like to give the floor to our dear colleague from Bulgaria, Lyubomir Dankov. Lyubomir, thank you very much for taking part in our conference today. The floor is yours, please. Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Lyubomir Dankov, and I'm an independent journalist from Bulgaria. So I can mostly talk about freedom of speech in Bulgaria. I wouldn't say that there are serious repressions against journalists in Bulgaria, but the main attack against the freedom of speech is actually about prohibiting independent media from speaking out. We have actually 3 mainstream media in Bulgaria that have access to the large public. Those are the one of the national networks and 2 private networks. And so in those mainstream media, there is no other point of view on many questions. Only the accepted, the official one is communicated. It can be connected to COVID, to gender ideology, then conflict in Ukraine, and now the conflict in Israel and Gaza. As an example, we can take the Ukrainian conflict. The problem is that the people like me are completely ignored. Independent journalists are ignored, regardless of the fact that we've actually been into the conflict zone. So our mainstream media outlets invite some guests, so-called professionals, that only show one side of the question. The same can be observed in connection to the conflict in Israel. Only one side is presented. So we have black and white division, because all the crimes that actually the other side does are kind of ignored. Journalists that would like to present a different point of view can do this, but in some small media outlets with small audience, also on social media, such as Facebook. I think Facebook plays a huge role in distributing another point of view in our country, because most of small media outlets actually function via Facebook. And for some time, Facebook has already been using so-called independent fact checkers that were censoring some materials according to their point of view, and that's how they hide the facts that are not convenient for them. And well, as we see, those fact checkers are not very efficient. And the social network actually works very well for those who only want to get the information that one can also see in the official media. As I said, there is no serious danger to journalists in our country yet. The problem is that independent journalists can't really reach big audience. They don't have this access. At the same time, there are some cases of persecution, and I will give you one example. There was a journalist that was actually arrested for her work, and now she has to pay the so-called compensation for what she's done. This sum is too big for her and for the outlet where she works. And so over the course of years, this journalist was actually working and independently, and that's how she actually got into trouble, and she had to actually then do everything that the official authorities told her to do, and then she also had to pay out the compensation within the court legislation. So the main idea is that journalists here should be behaving. So what is the solution? The solution is actually quite obvious. After we lost in the Cold War, our country has become influenced by the US. There are some recordings where actually politicians from the ruling party were coordinating their positions with the embassy of the US. It's quite evident that a lot of other words and positions are also coordinated with the US. I think the same problem exists in numerous European countries. Over the course of some years, we see only one party line in our country, and you can't contradict it at all. And I don't see any changes, but we need to introduce the changes, even though it's very difficult because people actually don't believe in that anymore. Unfortunately, status quo is winning here. Another factor that can actually play its role here is a new world order. And if a new Iron Curtain comes down, then everything we've achieved will be disrupted and destroyed. Actually, internet plays a huge role here as well because it hides the information. We can, or one can easily manipulate people with the help of media. In general, we have to be successful in creating free, independent media outlets where we can present different points of view. Such media can actually set the tone for other media outlets. Thanks a lot. That's it from my side.
Большое спасибо, Lyubomir.
Thank you so much, Lyubomir.
Передаем слово
And in my turn,
нашему
we
участнику.
are letting the floor to one more participant. This is the journalist from the USA, Sarah Bils. Distinguished Sarah, the floor is yours. Not hear you, you are muted.
Okay, how about now?
Да, Сара,
Definitely.
слышно. Большое спасибо.
Большое спасибо. Спасибо большое. Привет, как дела? Hi, I'm Sarah from the United States. I'm really honored to be on this panel of distinguished journalists that I don't really feel I belong to, but thank you nonetheless for having me. I'm sure we're talking about the dangers of censorship by Western media, and as a victim of such censorship, I can say firsthand, even though people are reporting from war zones, we are at war with our mother nations in the West. We've suffered, my channel alone has suffered from multiple revenue streams being shut down, our Twitter accounts being banned multiple times. We've been kicked off of fundraiser sites. And then in culmination, we were framed in an international crime that resulted in me being placed under investigation by the FBI, losing my job and losing my child, and almost losing my home. So the dangers of censorship are very real. I live in the country that places a facade and says that it's the bastion of free speech. I've had my crypto accounts shut down with thousands of dollars. And just, this isn't a victim story about me. It's just to show the lengths that they're going to silence us. And now we have another war front opening up in Israel, Palestine. And that's fighting that narrative is going to be much more difficult than we've ever fought the Russian-Ukraine narrative. So these conversations are extremely important. I hope that they continue, and I hope that we find more resourceful ways to fight back, because frankly, I'm very terrified that censorship is going to get worse, especially in places like Canada and the EU. But in the constraints of time, I don't want to monopolize any more time. I just want to say thank you for having me, and free Donbas and free Palestine.
Да. Большое спасибо,
Thank you so much, Sarah. This was a rather short presentation from your side, but again and again, we want to stress that we are happy to hear you. We're happy to see a person from the USA. And we do believe that there, in your country, there is also a voice of those people who are standing on their truth, on the ideals of the freedom of the democracy in their clearest sense, which indeed have huge value. And about this we are speaking today. Distinguished friends, the list of our presenters is exhausted for now. And now, I think I will say just the last words for our session for today. I want to ask for a certain information list that I wanted to read out at first. Thank you. Distinguished friends, today, multiple times in the branches of our discussion, we were speaking about the fact that every person today who is speaking or acting or having an opinion that is different from the canalized by the central media in the West, that those people are subject to a threat. Anybody who is coming to the territories who are nearby to the territories under control of the Ukrainian government, that those people who are ready to speak about the reality in this particular region, on these particular territories, about the real circumstances of life of those people who are day by day subject to shellings, to threats from the side of the Ukrainian government. They are subject to a threat. And the last recent information that we've got today is as follows. Today at night, at the shelling, I think it may be shelling or it may be a drone that was launched by the armed forces of Ukraine nearby Belgorod. There are new victims. The journalist of Sputnik agency and his wife, they are wounded, seriously wounded, and her 4-year-old daughter and the parents of the wife, they are also wounded. I beg your pardon, they are not only wounded, they were wounded, fatally wounded, and their 4-year-old daughter and the parents of the wife, they deceased. They were killed. And this is the horrific side of this life today. This cannot be a coincidence right now. This is the planned terroristic attack against humankind, against the people, and against the family who spoke the truth, who were involved in the dissemination of the truth about the crimes that are a part of the existence of the Ukrainian terroristic regime. And unfortunately, this is the essence of our work. This is the things that we are working with. We need to take care of ourselves. Therefore, please take care of yourself. Please do your work, because thanks to your action and speaking, the voice of the people, not only from Donbas, not only the people of Russia, but also the people of other regions that we were listening today to, we could have a voice today, we could hear a voice today from the territory of Palestine. We could raise the question from the territory of Syria. Basically, from all regions, all over the world. This gives us a hope. And the hope is that our collective effort may change something, may stop these catastrophic changes in the field of freedom of speech, in the field of fundamental human rights, which is seen today, which is happening today. Dear colleagues, shall you have any questions to some of present? We are ready to give you the floor to ask your questions as final remarks today. The floor is yours. Well, I think we've exhausted the agenda today. There are no additional questions. And from my side, if you allow, I will announce the results of our conference will be presented as the report, which will be sent for further approval to every participant at the conference. And details of this will be headed further to the UN Council on Human Rights for further dissemination, for further presentation to the participants, to the members, in the name of the protection of human rights all around the world. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Shall you have any comments? You may now use this last minutes to say it. Maxim, I was listening to all the presenters. At first, I want to say the condolences to all the relatives of the journalists, to the journalists who are losing their loved ones. I know this is terrible, but as soon as I was listening to the presentations, to the people, starting from my own experience in 2014, 2015, then I realized what was it like. I was on the exchange between the prisoners of war, and every time there were journalists there. And from the Ukrainian side, every time there was 1 or 2 journalists from a certain state media that was governed fully. From the side of Donetsk, there were many journalists. And not only Donetsk journalists, foreigners from all countries of the world. This was very vivid. We could see where is the side when you can freely speak about what you want to say. Thank you, Ivan. Yes, indeed, this tendency, we can see it in recent years, in many years, as long as we work, because those mass media, those people, those organizations who are more speaking about freedom of information, freedom of access to information, freedom of media, freedom of journalists per se, the ones, the first are they who are the limitators. They are putting the limits on the fundamental right that is a part of every human being. So, dear friends, do you have any other comments? Feel free to say it. Yes, please.
May I? I shall introduce myself. My name is Jenny. I live in the Netherlands, where Sonja should be. Also in my country, I was labeled as a terrorist by somebody who dropped some false information about me to the police. And because of that, my kids are kidnapped. And I have a lot of trouble with the juvenile care here in Holland. And I found out that juvenile care in Holland has kidnapped 120,000 kids and damaged these kids. And that's why they are making a big trouble for me here in the Netherlands to tell what I have to tell and to say what I have to say. I'm very glad I saw Sonja for the first time. I think Sonja and I know each other for about 7 years through Facebook. But on Facebook, I have another name. So I'm not on my own name on my Facebook account. It's Wieske Jansen. And I'm very glad I saw Sonja. And if Sonja wants, I can ask to the IVD here in the Netherlands if she can come to the Netherlands without getting arrested. Thank you. I hope you're all well. It's very difficult here to see the news and to know it's not real news. I think if you have 26 televisions from 26 countries, I think you see on each television, you see something different. And it's very hard to know what's true and what's not true. It's very hard, especially for me, it's all hard, but I can imagine for all other people who are not awake, who just believe the mainstream media, it's very hard. There is also a cancel culture here in the Netherlands. When you say too much, you can lose your job. So also here we have to be very careful. Thank you for meeting you and for speaking. I wish you the best.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you here. I didn't know you, but nice to meet you. And yes, I asked myself already if I can come back home. Well, I cannot because, you know, everything is cancelled for me. My bank account, my social security number, burgerservice. So I have no life when I go back. And because you need all this, you know that, what we need in the Netherlands to survive. And also the IVD, I asked my file and until now they refuse. So, you know, why. So, but anyhow, thank you very much. And also all the others, thanks very much. Thanks very much for inviting me. And also I'd like to say, we should not forget about Ukraine now. Gaza is in the news, Gaza-Israel conflict. I know it's very terrible there. I was in Palestine and I know it's unbelievable what is happening there in Gaza. It's an open prison already for 16 years. So yeah, it's terrible, but we must not forget about Ukraine because, you know, I was there and many of you were there and a lot of atrocities were there. I know in Mariupol, I know in Donetsk city. So, I mean, I know, Johnee, you are there in Donetsk city maybe. So I know every day people, you are get shelling, the HIMARS are coming down. I know that, I was there too. So yeah, we must not forget about Ukraine. And I think all of us who, when we have the opportunity again to go back to the Donbas, me for sure, I will come back. So, but now I'm in Moscow currently, but I've been many times already. So, well, thanks, Johnee. You too. Good luck for you there. Stay safe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say as my closing statements, I actually work a lot with Ivan. I see Ivan a lot. He's my good friend. And it came to my understanding how much it means to the people here, the presence of independent journalists, like Ivan and some of the other crew here. In one of the live streams we did with Sarah, actually, they said, wow, Johnny came and he gave us hope again. I didn't even realize how important it was to be here. So I really would like to invite any independent journalist that is thinking of coming here to come here. There is a network. I mean, there's some sort of Russian bureaucracy. There's a few hurdles, but the local people are going to welcome you. You can always approach Ivan and some other people here, and everything will be sorted out. It means a lot to the people. The foreigners are coming here and giving them a voice. So yeah, that's my closing statement for an issue that's totally not closed. Basically, our freedom to know what really happens.
Дорогие друзья, коллеги,
Distinguished friends, dear colleagues, I want to thank you for this event that we could facilitate. I think that this event is very important. It is important as the first step. Step one, to give the power to the voice that is differing from the European mainstream Western media generally, that this voice should be heard in international organizations, today on the platform of the UN, and further on this platform and on the other platforms. We will work hard on this topic, on your topic. Thank you very much for your work, for your labor. Thank you for being here together with us. I think, again, this is only the first step, and we will go on. We shall overcome. Thank you. And goodbye. Over and out.
Спасибо большое. До свидания.
Спасибо, до свидания.
Bye.
Спасибо.
Спасибо большое. Благодарю.
Спасибо.
Until next time.